Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Research Boot Camp. Today's presentation will cover increasing writing productivity as a busy clinical scholar. Our two presenters are Dr. Jennifer Mallow and Dr. Laurie Theeke. Dr. Mallow is an assistant professor at the WVU School of Nursing. The focus of her research is the development and use of technology to improve access and outcomes for people living in rural and underserved areas. As a nurse practitioner, she has provided care, promoted health, and managed disease for uninsured individuals since 2002. As a postdoctoral investigator, she received the West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Institute Research Scholar Award in 2012. She is currently a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Nurse Faculty Scholar. Her current research project is centered on evaluating feasibility, acceptability, and efficacy of an empirically developed HIPAA-compliant web-based system of mHealth sensors and mobile devices. The system she and her team developed is called MI Smart, allows patients to track diagnoses, medications, lab results, receive reminders for self-management, perform self-monitoring, obtain feedback in real time, engage in education, and attend visits through video conferencing. Dr. Theeke is an associate professor of nursing in the Department of Adult Health at West Virginia University's School of Nursing and clinical associate professor in the Department of Family Medicine at West Virginia University's School of Medicine. She is an alumni of the Robert Wood Johnson Nurse Faculty Scholars Program, an American Nurses Foundation Scholar, and a graduate of the WVU Teaching Scholars Program. Her research program is centered on loneliness as a biopsychosocial stressor that negatively impacts physical and behavioral human health. Currently, the WVCTSI is funding her project for feasibility of her Listen intervention for loneliness and stroke patients. She is married, the mother of 13 children, and the owner of 2 small businesses in West Virginia. Her faculty coaching specializations are becoming an integrated scholar, drafting individual development plans that balance research, clinical responsibilities, and teaching, building teams to enhance writing productivity, and balancing the demands of family with work to maintain your sanity. So here's Dr. Mallow. I think we're all set. So,
okay, sounds good. Hi, thanks for coming. Happy lunchtime. So, I'm Jen, and that's Laurie. People often confuse the two of us and call us by the different names, and Laurie doesn't know why that happens, but I do. It's because when I'm going to say something snarky, I stand up and introduce myself as Laurie Theeke. So don't tell her. Don't tell her that I do that. So before we get started today, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, not because I think that it's important or that you should know about me, but just because, you know, oftentimes we think when we're going to increase our productivity that if you have a large chunk of time or if you just had time in your schedule, you'd be able to do it. So I just kind of want to describe what it is that I do so that you understand that I don't have that chunk of time either. I also don't think that I am 100% qualified to give this talk, but it is something I've overcome in my professional career, and so I just want to give you some tips. So I embrace the tripartite mission of an academic nurse scholar. You know, I teach. I have 3 master's courses that I teach per year. I have doctoral students that are in clinical doctorates and PhD doctorates. I have an informatics class that I think last count we had, 87 students registered for the summer. I'm on multiple committees. I, serve on a national level, a regional level, the school-wide level, that kind of stuff. I don't have 13 children like Laurie does, but I do have 1 child, and I live about 45 minutes away from here in Brewston Mills, West Virginia. We have a small farm where we raise trout and have an orchard. I have a 13-year-old that's very busy. So we're all balancing. I have a practice that I maintain. We're all balancing multiple things in our life. So by the end of this 50-minute presentation, I want you to be able to identify the multiple barriers that you have to scholarly productivity and describe several techniques to up your writing game. So why did we write? I don't think that anyone that decided to attend this session grew up saying, I love scientific writing, and that's what I want to do when I grow up. I just love scientific writing, right? None of us went into health sciences because that's what we wanted to do. Most of the time, we loved science, or we wanted to help people, or we're fascinated by the human body and we really want to get our hands around a problem and do something to fix it, right? None of us said, I want to sit behind a computer screen and put my thoughts about healthcare into black and white so that multiple people who I don't know and who don't know me can comment on my writing ability and my scientific thinking, right? So let's just get that straight, that none of us want to do or like to do scientific writing. So why do we do it? Well, because it is the currency of academics, right? Because our institution is a land-grant institution that expects us to produce scholarly work. And they expect us to do that because it is the currency that we have, right? It gives the university prestige, it gives the university F&A money, and it's what we're meant to do as academics, is to spread our knowledge. And if we do that, then we're given monetary gain through promotion, sometimes bonuses, and other recognition like that. However, again, let's just acknowledge that none of us do it because we love scientific writing. What do you need to write? So some of you in this audience have specific things that you're writing about. You have a grant application that's due in 3 months and your chair is expecting you to submit it. You have a database paper that the funder expects you to submit because your funding is up in September and it's the last publication that you've promised them. You're working as a team, as a clinician, and you're expected to give your pieces of expertise, and they're 3 months past due. And all of that sounds daunting, but we have a plan for you today. Some of you, and I see one of my other nursing colleagues in here, but some of you don't know what it is that you're expected to write. You were in a role previous to this that didn't expect scholarly productivity, and you're struggling with what to write. Scholarly productivity comes in various forms, and the definition of scholarship is beginning to broaden. Obviously, the highest forms of scholarly productivity are grant applications and federal funders with high F&A. And database publications and peer-reviewed journals. However, other forms of publication that are listed here are often very recognized and encouraged, and especially if you're just building your expertise in an area. And while these also sound daunting, we have some plans for you about that. So how do Laurie and I decide what it is that we're going to write? I both love and hate this slide all at the same time because it shows you basically the last 5 years of my life, just right there on one slide. So based on, we keep a running list of papers and proposals, and we have multiple interventions in various stages of development, and we both test those intervention with live people. And we follow this similar process for developing and testing. And depending on where we're at in the life cycle of development depends on what it is that we write. So if we're right at the beginning of problem identification, we're deep in the literature doing literature reviews and synthesis. If we've already built the intervention and tested it, that's when we have our database papers that are coming out. So if you don't have a process that you follow, that it doesn't have to be this one. This one is the process for developing complex interventions, and it's by Corey et al., and it's widely available, published in 2013. But if you don't have something like this, you need to get yourself a process like this to follow so that you always have something coming up in the pipeline to write. However, here's the process that most scholars follow. You pick a topic, either assigned or self-directed, and the topic seems like a good idea, and you think you'll have no problem writing that product. And you get excited about that topic, and you talk to your peers and your colleagues. You maybe even tell your boss. You have a due date for it, and you think, oh good, we have a long weekend right before the due date, and I'll just bang it out then. And maybe this weekend, since I'm not on call, I'll look up some references, I'll print them off or download them to my tablet so that when I'm not busy in clinic, I can do a little light scientific reading. So you proceed to carry those articles around with you for several weeks, and once you've had a moment to think about, man, your bag is really heavy, and you remember why, then you feel guilty and you vow to work on it this weekend when you have a, quote, big chunk of time. It's almost the long weekend that you thought you were going to just bang out the work, and so you finally start reading the articles. You realize that the articles are missing a critical piece of information, or worse, don't have anything to do with the piece that you wanted to write. You go back for more resources, and this is when you begin to panic. You either find over 1 million references, or you find none. One of two things happen at this point. You stay up way too late, you don't see your family, you neglect things at the clinic, you scrape together a product, you submit it, spend the following week catching up on charts and labs you neglected, and you receive submission feedback from the site requiring revisions. You think, great, I have 2 days off right before they want it back, and I'll just bang it out then. You take a quick break on that work to catch up on some sleep and some family time, and you begin the cycle again. Or you miss the deadline, clearly for reasons out of your control, and complain to your colleagues, peers, and maybe your boss about the shortcomings of the academic environment to support your pursuit of excellence. So what if I say that there's a different way? So now I'm going to tell you a story about 2012. It was 2011. I graduated with my PhD. I was in a clinical track here at the university prior to getting my PhD, and I really thought, I've gotten this PhD. The dean's going to think I'm a shoo-in for a tenure track position, and she called me into her office, and I thought, great, I'm going to get the formal offer of this tenure track position. And she sat me down and she said, it was not the current dean that we have, so just so you know that. She sat me down and said, I value you as an employee, but you're not getting this tenure track position. You're not ready for it. You don't deserve it. And, we'd like to keep you as clinical faculty, but you're not getting this tenure track position. And I said, thank you, ma'am. And I did what any adult, grown woman does, is I, marched right to Laurie's office and cried. And so she, at that time, said some very validating things about my expertise and how awesome I was. And then she said, but she's right, you're not ready, and this is what we're going to do. You're going to develop a plan for yourself. What are your career goals? And I was like, well, my career goals were I was going to get my PhD and I was going to go into a tenure track. That's what my career goals are. And she said, well, no, you have to have a plan. You have to have like a goal, and you have to have, you don't have that? And I said, no, I don't have that. And she said, well, you need an individual development plan. And so we do that. We each have an individual development plan. My first individual development plan, and there are 2 ladies in this room that have seen these from me. They know that in the 5 years between then and now, those plans started off as a 13-page document with, and I would bring it to Laurie and Pam, and they would say, well, this is not for your whole life. This is for like this year, right? And so I'd be like, no, I'm going to do all this stuff this year. And Laurie's like, listen, you want me to read this again? It needs to be a 3-page document. It needs to be something that you can accomplish in 3 years, and it needs to be measurable. You need to be able to say, this is the product of what my plan is, and this is how I'm going to meet these goals. And so we started that year 1, and she said, and then in a year, we're going to go to the dean, and you're going to say, I developed a plan to meet all of the expectations for a assistant professor in the tenure track, and I deserve that position, and that's what's happened. And so we've switched deans in that part, and I'm glad she's not here. I'm glad the new dean's not here, because the new dean doesn't even know that old person, that old clinical scholar that was, talking about the shortcomings of the academic institution. So my tenure file went in December, and I shouldn't be so mouthy right now because I don't actually have tenure yet. So we'll just move on from that. So this is an individual plan. We put it together in January of every year. It's okay that it's almost May, because you can develop one for the summer and the fall, and we revise them every semester based on our progress. It's usually about 3 pages in length, and includes a grid like this for teaching, scholarship, service, and practice. For accountability, we share them with each other, we share them with our mentors, we share them with our department chairs, and we share them with our dean. And this is a written plan for our own personal career goals that also meets the needs and the mission of the school. So like, you can't put ridiculous things on there that your dean and your chair don't want you to do, right? So it has to be some sort of a negotiation between what it is that you need to do to push your career forward and what it is that the school needs from you. And we could give an entire 4-hour session probably about developing this individual plan, and Dr. Theeke has given that, that session, but for the interest of time, we'll go ahead and move on. I do want to say about this plan that a colleague of ours told Laurie that she couldn't be here and that she wanted Laurie to kind of bottom line, one tip for increasing my productivity. And Laurie gave her a very good one, but it made me think, well, what would be my one tip to you all to increase your writing productivity? And it would definitely be, this is the one tip, because it lets me focus on what it is that is important to me in my career development, and it also lets me say no to things, the interesting things that pop up through the year, right? We're all bright. We all like to procrastinate the work that we are doing for something new and shiny that has the potential for doing other things, and we all want to say yes to those new and exciting things. Or we don't want to say yes to them, and we know that it's going to take us off of our path. And so we can say to our department chairs or our colleagues, that's a great opportunity, but not right now because it doesn't fit into this plan. Maybe we can fit it in for next year, or maybe I can help you think of someone else that it would fit into their plan. Unless it's your dean, and then you say, well, let me just add another, I'll right click, add another row, and you fit it in. So that's my tip. My second tip would be develop a schedule. And again, nothing I'm saying to you is rocket science. It's just providing tips that have worked for me from going from 0 publications to 30 publications. That's all. So I develop a long-term schedule based on that IDP. And I put my fixed commitments to not only my work stuff, but also to my home stuff. So because, you know, we all only have 24 hours in a day. We all only have 12 months in a year. We all have commitments to things that are other than our job, and we all value those commitments and want to do them. So even organization meetings and family special occasions that don't necessarily fit into that calendar, I put them in my calendar because I know that they are blocks of time that I don't want to give up. I do an intermediate schedule, and I'm going to show you an example of that. And I give myself specific times to do them. It's like an appointment with myself. And then I have a short-term or daily schedule that I adjust on a daily basis, usually because I'm behind from the day before. So this is, it's hard to see kind of up there, but this is what my long-term schedule looks like. This was March of last year. We gave this talk to some doctoral students last year. But really, I put things on here, and you can see that there are big chunks of time blocked off. And you can really see that there's only a couple of days in that month that I would have a big chunk of time to sit down and work on a project. And I complete these long-term schedules in about 3-month chunks because we're on an academic calendar, so it makes sense to do that from January to May, and then from May to August, and then from September to December, right? So I put those big chunks of time in there. And again, these are my fixed time commitments, my class schedules, my meeting times, my personal things, my special occasion. And then this is actually something that I print off and take with me. This is pretty typical for me. I write with a purple pen and it's purple and sparkly because those kind of things make me happy. And if you wait to be happy for the big shiny things, then you're not happy for a lot of your life. So anyway, I print this off weekly. I have a meeting with myself weekly, and I write down all of the things that I have to accomplish, and then I give myself time to do them in the week. And then I realize some of these things are just things I'd like to do, not things that I have to do. I want you to notice in the beginning, every day, and I probably should just print it in my schedule so I don't have to write it every week. However, I write it every week. I write for 30 minutes, that's it, 30 minutes every day. I find the 30 minutes that works best for me. I find that if I write after 1 p.m. in the afternoon, the next morning when I read that, I think, who wrote this drivel? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't hang together. The thoughts aren't coherent. So I write the first thing in the morning. I write before my son gets up. I write before I have breakfast. I do get a cup of coffee. I write at my home computer. The only thing that's there to bother me in the morning is a 100-pound dog, and at this point she's so old that sometimes I have to dust her. So it's a time that I have 30 minutes. How do I decide what I'm going to write at that 30 minutes? And then everything else has to fit in at other times. I don't check my email during that 30 minutes or before that 30 minutes. I don't do other things during that 30-minute time, and I only spend 30 minutes a day on my personal writing. How do I pick what I'm going to write? Well, we come up with a schedule of, we have that running list of articles and grant proposals that we're writing. We go to the next one. This is a schedule. It usually takes, for me to write a first authored paper, it usually takes 14 to 15 weeks, which is interesting because that's what a semester lasts. And we have a specific kind of method that we use so that every day when you're writing something, you know what you're working on, right? So it's not that big chunk of time, but when I sit down in front of my screen, I know what it is that I'm going to write. If it's week 1, I'm in the literature and I'm gathering my literature and I'm reading, because part of writing is reading. If it's week 2, now I have all of my literature and I've really been in that literature and I've really read it. And so now I'm doing an outline with my purpose statement, right? And I won't read all of these things to you, but that's how I decide what I'm going to write for the week. Sometimes it changes, right? Sometimes I have a really awful time with the outline or the purpose statement, and I have to take it to a colleague and say, is this what I'm trying to do? Is this what I'm thinking about? And so then the next week I have to revise, but I spend 1 week at a time on these big chunks of papers. Feedback. So let me talk about that really quick before Dr. Theeke takes the stage. I used to hate feedback. I would not like to take feedback, and I actually still take feedback in a very kind of prescribed way for myself. I read the feedback and think, well, that's nonsense. They don't know what they're talking about. So I live with that for about 5 minutes, and then I'm like, oh, it's from Penn, so they probably know something about what they're talking about. I mean, like they have an advanced degree, and they're a smart person, and they're well respected, and they're well published, so they probably do know something. So then I live in that. And then I think, this is not a personal attack on me. This is making me better. And so I've changed that perspective from hating and dreading feedback to welcoming and inviting feedback, because everyone needs it. It's not a reflection on your ability to write or think. It is a reflection on your ability to think in a different way or make things more clear, because sometimes they're clear in your head, and when you say them on paper, they're not as clear to others as you intended them to be. So don't take feedback as a personal attack. Don't argue with feedback. I give myself 5 minutes to argue with feedback because it feels good. But don't argue with feedback in writing. Don't sit on requested revisions for longer than a week, because they don't get better, right? Like it's very rare that I come back to a requested revision and think, oh, they were exactly right. No, you think I was unclear about some way and I have to figure out how to make that clear. But it doesn't get better the longer you sit on it. Do accept all editorial changes. Who cares? Just make them. Especially by a co-author or peer. And do make a table of revisions, because it helps you identify where your thinking and grammatical errors are, so you can identify those later. All right, and then send it in and celebrate. So at the week, you can see that a semester lasts for 15 weeks and that my plan is only for 14 weeks, because we're all human beings and everybody needs like a week to just kind of catch their breath. And you have to celebrate those things. If you don't celebrate, again, it's like writing with a purple pen. If you don't enjoy the small things in life and you don't enjoy some of those small victories, like sending in a paper, and you wait to be happy when things are perfect or things are the big, RO1 comes in with the huge F&A for the school, you're not going to be happy for most of the time. So send it in and celebrate. I'm going to give it over to Dr. Theeke. We'll answer questions at the end if you have them and we have time.
Hi. I am very glad to be here to talk to you about writing. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, and I'm glad to see so many people here. I'm going to tell you that I hope that you can take about 25 minutes, and if you're taking notes on your phone, that's fine. But I learned from one of my colleagues yesterday, our visiting scholar, that I should ask my students, which is what you are for the next 30 minutes, put your phone down and look at the slides I got for you here, because I think I'm going to help you a little bit to overcome some barriers to writing. And really, I'm going to talk to you, Jen gave you a lot of the logistics, I'm going to talk to you about the psyche of writing, okay? I study a lot of psychological concepts in my research, and if you cannot overcome the psychological barriers you're experiencing with writing, you're not going to be a highly productive writer. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about my commitment to writing. And I was at a national conference, and I was averaging about 5-6 years ago, I was averaging 1 paper a year. That's not very good. That's where I was at. I was a brand new assistant professor, and Courtney Leiter, who's a dean from the UCLA School of Nursing, was giving a talk. And he is this like super productive writer, okay? So Courtney's up there, and I really like him, and he said he had 50-some papers in a year. And it was just like a light bulb went off at that moment in my very junior rank as a professor and listening to him. And I thought, I want to do that. I need to do that. And I have no excuses left about my lack of productivity. I mean, I'm a nurse practitioner. I still see patients every week in family medicine. I'm just finished helping 50-some students write systematic review papers in my class that are clinical doctoral students. And I thought, if I don't demonstrate to these students and to other people that I can be a productive writer, then I'm not really fulfilling my faculty role. So I made a psychological commitment to writing. And so my little journey began with trying to figure out how to be the best writer. Now, I did complete some coaches training, and I also completed the boot camp for the National Center for Faculty Development Diversity. WVU is a member of that National Center. Jen and I have both completed that program. That's a 15-week program. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some tips that I did learn in my coaches training there, and I learned from that program. Okay, so hopefully that'll be helpful to you. So this is the first thing I want to talk to you about. If you want to be a productive writer, the very first thing you have to do is learn your own responses to writing. You have to think about how you think about writing. Okay? You've got to be extremely mindful of your internal emotional response to writing, and you've got to be aware of the personal thoughts you have about writing. So when I first started writing, I was kind of like the angry writer. You know, as an angry little assistant professor writer, I was like, I got to write a paper, and the dean says I have to write a paper, and I don't really want to write the paper right now because I want to see my patients, and I don't have time, and I had a frustration, you know, and then I had a kid with like a knee injury or something, you know, I mean, all these things going on, and I was a little bit angry. But we know that if you're having a negative emotional response to writing, that is going to elicit a physiological stress response, right? And you're not going to do your best writing, and you're not going to be your most productive. So be aware of those emotional responses that you're having, and then be aware of your personal thoughts too, and your inner critics. Okay, we all have, how many of you have had the inner critic? Like when I first started writing, I had like an overwhelming inner critic and skeptic that would say things to me like, I'd be typing little sentences and paragraphs, you know, thinking I'm doing a good job, and then the thoughts would creep in of like, maybe that sentence isn't good enough. Maybe this paragraph isn't right. Maybe I'm not quite doing what I should be doing to get this paper published, you know. Maybe it'll never get published, you know, and those kinds of inner critic and inner skeptic and negative thoughts, they can just take you down a path of no productivity, because you have to get to the point where you recognize that what you're writing is good, you know, that you have something to offer, that you're making a difference, that you're building knowledge, that your peers want to read it, and that your colleagues, you know, will learn from what you're writing, and then you'll be in a better place and be more productive. So just try to be mindful of that and be aware of your reaction to writing. You know, I also had a little stint, which some of you may have had, of being like wounded warrior writer, where I was like, I sent my first paper in because the person teaching the class said, that's a great paper, you should send that in. So I'd listen to my faculty and I send that paper in, and then it got rejected, and then I, like for a long time, I think it was like 8 years, I've never sent it back in. You know, with that first paper, I spent about a year being like the wounded warrior. I was like, oh, I'm so hurt. You know, my paper didn't get accepted. I thought it would because the faculty said it was great, and it didn't. So you want to avoid that. Like, come to reality a little bit about what you're doing and the logistics of what you're doing and how the process is really going to go and how good you really are. Because we all have something to offer. We're all scholars in academia. So we have to learn that about yourself, how you respond to writing and how to talk it down. Okay? It took me a long time to say, go away, inner critic. You know, the writing's good enough. Get off my shoulder because I'm about to do this, and do some positive self-talk so that you can move forward with your writing. So avoid the super positive. I will tell you that, like, this little character up here on the right, up here, Jen can tell you, like, in January of every year when we're doing our development plan, I'm like super positive. You know, I know this about myself now, but I'm like, hey, let's write 30 papers this year. Let's get this stuff done. We can do it. We can write all these things, even though we're teaching all these students. But then I have to come back to, like, the reality of Earth, you know, where I'm like, really what we're going to do is have our scheduled writing time and write as much as we can and accept that feedback and keep going. We're going to persevere so that we can be highly productive. So I'm probably not going to write the proposal in 2 days, but I like to think sometimes that I can. But in reality, that's not going to happen. Okay. All right. So in addition to those emotional responses and personal thoughts that you have, we also have cognitive distortions when we write. Okay. And this is very problematic. And so you have to do some self-assessment about what your personal distortions are. Recently I got some grant feedback and I had to work on this with filtering because I tend to focus on negative feedback. And that's problematic in 2 ways, because it's problematic because it leads you down a negative emotional path, but it's also problematic because you've got to be careful to work on strengthening the weaknesses of papers and not diminishing the strengths of papers. And if you need to have an equal focus there, you have to focus on the strengths so that you don't change something in the paper that a reviewer identified as a strength while you're trying to fix the weaknesses. So it's very important that you're not doing that filtering and that you're really seeing all the good and all the negative that people tell you about your work so that you can make appropriate revisions and move on to publication without second and third sets of revisions. Because when you get into like second, third, fourth sets of revisions, then that limits your productivity for that year. We do some polarizing sometimes as faculty, where we tend to think that this is very problematic. I think with students too, we tend to think something has to be perfect to submit it to a journal. And I don't know if any of you are engaged in this sort of like striving for perfection on the paper, but it's okay unless it's keeping you from submitting the paper. And so avoiding this thinking about the paper has to be perfect to submit it, because really the paper has to be good enough to submit it so that you can then get the feedback you need from that specific editor at that specific journal that you're targeting, because you don't know what they're going to say, you can't read their mind, you don't know exactly what they want, then so you can tailor the paper a little more and do those revisions to get that paper out the door, to get that proposal resubmitted. So overgeneralizing or jumping to conclusions is also problematic. And as faculty, we sometimes do that, where we overgeneralize based on one piece of evidence, or we just jump to conclusions based on one piece of feedback. And you just try to slow your thinking down if that's happening to you. If you're jumping to conclusions, if you get a lot of negative feedback and you immediately go to that big jump that like the paper isn't worth publishing, that's problematic, because that's probably not real. You know, that's a jump. It's about listening and paying attention to the feedback that you receive so that you can make improvements and get your work published and out there. And avoid catastrophizing or personalizing. Generally not getting a paper accepted the first time or a proposal, it's not a catastrophe. It's a hassle. I'll give you that, it's a hassle. But it's not a catastrophe. It's not like a national disaster or catastrophe, right? And it's often not personal. It's painful, but not personal. Usually the reviewers, you know, sometimes you get it back and you're like, oh, I wonder who that reviewer was. I wonder why they said that about my work. You know, and make it very personal. But I review for quite a few sort of higher impact geriatric or nursing journals, and I don't know any of the authors, and I try to give very specific feedback on those reviews, but it's never personal. You know, I don't know the authors, and I'm genuinely reviewing from the perspective of, this is probably a young nurse author or student trying to get their work published, and how can I give them the best feedback possible to make this a rigorous piece of work so that they can have their work published in this higher impact journal, which would be very good for their career. And I think that should be the attitude, and is the attitude for most reviewers that I know, is that they genuinely are trying to help you make your work better for you, for your success, right? Because you want your paper to be cited. Well, you want to show that impact yourself. You want to get that paper out the door and get that paper cited. And so come from that. Come like, oh, wow, this person took their time and they gave me very specific feedback, sometimes line by line, which can be very annoying, but, you know, to make my paper better so that I can get this paper out there and get this paper cited. All right. And then control. If you have false beliefs about feeling controlled or inequity, you have to take that on again with yourself. Be mindful of that. Publishing isn't easy, as far as I know, for anybody. For anybody. It's just not easy. This is hard scholarly work. And it does take time. And I don't know of anyone, even people that are publishing all the time, I still don't think it's easy for them. They're still trying to figure out what's the best word to write on the page. What's the best way to structure this paragraph? What's the best way to end this paper? What's the best advice I can give to my colleagues so that they can read this paper and come away with some new information about my topic of interest? So they'll want to cite my paper. Okay, so this was the tip I gave my colleague the other day, and this is the tip that I will give you. And Jen talked a lot about scheduling, but unless you can really marry your commitment to writing with time, you're not going to be successful. It takes both, and it takes just regular, sustained commitment and time. And so daily writing takes diligence, but it really just takes this commitment. And we all write at different times. I have a certain way that I write. Jen has a certain way that she writes, but we have that daily commitment to writing and daily block of time. So I did have my doctoral students actually post it on their wall. And I think it's a good idea if you have students and you have the students and you expect them to write, or it might be helpful to you too. Sometimes it's good to write to have a little statement about your commitment to writing on the wall of your office or your door, because it lets other people know that you've made this commitment for self-development. And it also lets other people know that that time is not to be disturbed. That is your time. That's your time where you're developing yourself as a scholar, as a researcher, as a publisher, really, so that you can develop yourself and be better for your students and for the university. So that's not time that can be easily taken by someone knocking on the door. And it's also a way of asking for support. It's like, hey, I made this commitment to my writing, and I want your support on that. Help me with that. Help me protect that time. Okay, creating a scholarly writing plan. Jen gave you the way we do it. These are the minimum requirements. In addition to this, I'd say if you have time to add another column, add journal choice, but sometimes we don't do that right away. But at a very minimum, you need to have the papers you're going to write for the year or proposals you're going to write for the year, who the authors are going to be, and that needs to be negotiated up front. What's the status of that paper? What are those authors going to contribute? And then your plan or schedule for moving forward. Okay? Know your resources. This is very, very important. Know your resources. What's the best time for you? And then the other thing I do, and Jen and I do it differently. She writes at her home office. I write at my work office. I don't write at home. I got 13 kids at home. 8 still, but they were there. So there's 8 kids at home. I'm not writing at home. There is no way. You know what I do? I come to, being at my office is the easiest part of my day. I come to that office, I go in there. It's like Peace World, And so I come in there. I have specific music I play, and I have done this since my dissertation. And so you can train your brain to go to writing mode. I'm convinced of it. And so I play George Winston instrumental piano music. And my colleagues know, if the piano is playing in that office, no. Do not come in, no. That is my time for writing, and that is a very good time for me. And I know my space, what I need for my space. You know what I need? I need my cup of hot tea or coffee. I'm into this new organic tea that Jen gave me now. But I need the tea, a hot beverage, quiet except for George Winston. I need some motivation and an energy level to write and be productive, right? And I need to be left alone. And I need my plan. I need to know what I'm working on for that day. So what are your resources? I need to now have go-to people to review these papers, which we do have a team that reviews. And at least, I won't talk about mentoring, but at least a professor or mentor on speed dial. The other thing we do, I don't know if Jen mentioned it, but I don't know if y'all use reference managing systems, but we do not write without a reference managing system. I use EndNote. Really hard to be a productive writer if you're not having your references in a reference managing system. Okay, I have 3,000 references now on loneliness because that's my topic, and I continue to build this reference database so that I can keep it up to date and keep current references in there and be productive. And so if you're not using a reference managing software, maybe ask your chair or department if they would get that for you, because it is essential to being a highly productive writer. You still need a mentoring structure, even as an associate professor. You have to have mentors, people that review, people to consult with, people to tell you when you're like way over the top on something and you need to go back and take a break. You know, you've got to have your mentors on writing and work-life balance so that you can stay motivated and stay productive. Okay, and then this is the other thing we do is track barriers. It's important to do. Track your barriers to writing. Just write them down. You know, what's the problem today? What's going on today? Am I overwhelmed with something else today? Because then you become knowledgeable about yourself and your pattern of writing. And, you know, you can't write, like I said, with those negative emotions, it's hard to write from a scholarly perspective, but also you can't live in what I call the state of overwhelm. Like if you're living in a state of overwhelm, your paper's not going to be as good probably because you're stressed. You're not going to think as well. So if you're in that state, you've got to go revisit your plan, your calendar, and think about how you can break that job down into smaller pieces so that you're not in that state. Again, avoid perfectionism. And okay, know your avoidance behaviors. This is another good point to have. Like, I know exactly my process for getting into the writing ritual, and I have classic avoidance behaviors. So, no, first I'm going to go and stop and talk to two people in the hallway. You know, then I'm probably going to check my email for a minute, even though I know I shouldn't. And then, you know, if you learn your own avoidance behaviors, you can shut them down. Then you're able to be mindful enough and self-reflective enough to shut your avoidance behaviors down. And so, or just be aware of them so you know you're not meeting your writing obligation to yourself because you're engaging in avoidance behaviors. And some days I'm okay with that. Some days I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I have a little avoidance here, and then I'll get back to it. So, you know, if you want to take a day off, I would say take a day off after you write for 15 minutes. That's a good strategy because usually what happens is anything, I don't know if you ever read that, there's a book about writing your dissertation in 15 minutes a day, but, you know, usually if you start writing and you say, I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes, like you're going to write longer than that most likely because you get into the writing. So, you know, try to, if you have a day where you're like, I just don't want to do it today, be like, but I'll do it for 15 minutes, you know, bargain with yourself a little bit, and then I'll go take my day off. Most likely you're going to write maybe 30 minutes and then take your day. You still get some writing done, and you feel good about that the next day. Okay? If you're low on energy, you need to walk, move, physical activity, do something, get your energy up. And then if you have truly writer's block, you need just call someone right away. You know, don't wait. You know how the student, like the failing student, doesn't call the professor at the end of the semester, and that never works out. Like if you're having really writing block, writing trouble, you just pick up the phone right away and be like, hey, I don't know what's going on. You know, I'm really having a lot of trouble writing today. I need someone to help me get back on track. And talk it out with someone so that you can get back on track. So, and you can fix extrinsic barriers because those are things like being defensive with your time and your space and interruptions. I brought you a little sign today. It's out there to put on your door. It says, do not disturb writing, and it's out there for you to pick up. So put that on your door when you're writing, and, you know, fix your space so it's nice, and whether it's at home or at work, because you want to go into an inviting space when you're trying to do your best work. You got to take care of yourself. Okay, so these are just things we know about tracking time. I've tried tracking my writing time and then not tracking my writing time, and now I'm signed up for the alumni program again this summer for tracking my time with that National Center, because I just think tracking your writing time, they have a timer device on the website, and it's nice. You can say, I'm starting my writing now, and there's other people writing around the country because it's a national program, and so you can type little messages to those people of encouragement too. And at the end, it'll give you a summary of how much time you've spent writing, and that can be very validating and rewarding. So I do recommend setting a writing timer. You don't have to do that program to get the timer because there's many apps available where you can track your writing time and productivity. So you can just search those on the App Store and find something that you like to track your writing time. But, you know, it's so nice at the end of a month or so, and we've done this to see, like, you know, when you think maybe you've had a month where you weren't as productive, to go back and generate a report and see, no, I wrote all this time this month. You know, I'm moving forward with my goals in my program. And check in with yourself every week. See where you're at with your schedule and your program. Adapt, re-strategize. Really, you know, give yourself a little prize for an accomplishment, whatever you like to do. And then check in with your co-authors weekly as well. This is a way of having a little bit of support. And so we're always checking in, saying, where are you at with that paper? We have a regular weekly day that we write unless we agree not to. And sometimes we're like, no, let's write individually for a while and then come back together. But, just checking in with your co-authors and saying, where are you at with your part of the paper? Can I help you with that? Are you stuck? Are you having any problems? Are you needing anything from the rest of the team? And it's a way of having support while you're writing. And that's very important. Faculty do sometimes work by themselves, but I prefer to work with other people. And it's just so nice to have a product that comes out of a group of people. I think you get a better paper because you get all those good ideas from everyone on the team. So it makes your paper so much better. We do have group rules where we do take the feedback from each other, but we don't blame people at all. There's no shame and no blame. That's one of our rules, is like, no, I don't call Jen up and say, where is your work? And we just don't, that's not how to work within a group, and that's not how you can be most productive. So we will call and say, what can I do to help? Is there anything else I can do to support you so we can get this moving forward? But being with a group of people and having these kinds of rules for like the way you're going to interact and treat each other in the group is very important to maintaining your group, having stability in your group, and then moving your work to where it should be. Okay, and then we have this regular recommitment every year. We do our plan, and that's important from a psychological perspective because we all have challenges and crises that occur, and we can get off track. And so just making sure that you're checking in and doing that regular recommitment. If you've gotten sidelined, you can get back on track. We all have things where we have to step away for a while and then come back and get it back together there. So. And we do celebrate. Like when we have a paper that gets published, we always Twitter it out and Facebook it out. And we try to celebrate our little successes and get a cup of tea. And we do things like that. We buy each other little things. And I bought my team teacups a couple times because, it's nice to come in with your little academic sweater on and your cup of tea and write together in a room. It feels good.
Any questions from the group? It's like our feel-good presentation.
Mm-hmm. So
Everybody ready to write? Like you get 13 papers on your plan? I will say about my plan, Laurie talked about regular recommitting. I have to do it on a weekly basis. Like I really have to, stuff creeps on my plan. The Associate Dean of Research comes with like this great idea that, she wants me to write a grant for, and then I have to look at my plan and see where it fits in. So, all right. Oh, question.
Hey, Pam.
So I know you were often working on more than one paper at a time.
Yeah.
And so while you have your nice 15-week schedule, how do you adapt that when you've got 3 papers?
That's a good question. You want me to take that one?
Sure.
Okay. So the question is, when you're writing on multiple papers at one time and you have a 15-week plan, how do you prioritize your time? I usually have one paper per semester that I feel like is my paper that I'm working on, and then probably about 5 papers a semester that are, I don't want to say it's other people's work, but it's kind of how I perceive that in my own head. And so that doesn't, those papers, those 5 other papers don't go into my 30-minute slot. They go into my list of things to do, and I prioritize that throughout the day. Anything that is in galley proofs or ready to be submitted gets the top priority. And then things that are in various development get lower priority. Because, galley proofs, that's what you're working for, right? So, yeah, that's... And you only have 24 hours, right? And you want that thing to get out. The other things will get there.
Yeah.
So.
I take the hard deadlines and then I'll just have like 5 papers open because sometimes I get bored with one. You'll be working on one, you'll be like, well, that's getting boring. I don't want to do that revision on that one. And then I'll just go to the other one and see if I can make some progress on that one. So just keeping different papers open. I think one thing I didn't say, I see a lot of lab coats here. I do see patients every week. And I think if you're going to do your scheduled writing time, make sure, try to empty, which I know it might be a fantasy, but try to empty or respond to all the things in your Epic inbox the night before the morning you're going to write. Or, because when you have patients, you do have to respond to those patients in a timely fashion. And so it can be hard balancing that with writing time. But most patients, unless it's an urgent or emergent issue, they can wait for you to do 2 hours of writing. So just, recognize that and try to avoid not only your email, but that Epic inbox if you can for, 30 minutes to, I think, 2 hours so that you can really be a productive writer. It's tough to do, you know, it's tough to do, or I'll try to get in there and check it the night before I know I'm going to write and make sure I've handled any like prescription refills and other those sort of tasky things that you have to do with patients so that you can then focus on your writing the next morning, because I have to get that out of my head sometimes too. It's like, well, I got to do the patient stuff first, right? Because they're patients and they're so important to us, so, yeah. Well, this semester, I'm going to tell you, there's two schools of thought on students. I've learned from my colleague Jen on the students. I really have. When I used to be like, okay, I got 50 some students this semester, all writing papers, taking exams and everything. Oh, they're taking finals this week. And I used to put them off a little bit, you know, because students in today's world, like my classes are largely online. You know, but they like a response when they want a response, right? Like, I mean, if you don't respond like in an hour, they get a little panicky because they want to move forward with their work too. And they were all writing papers, and honestly, we were hoping some of them would publish their papers and get their presentations out. So I took Jen's advice this semester on that, even though she might not know it. But like, she even gives students her cell phone, which I never wanted to do, but I did. I thought, forget it. I'm just going to be available to these students, see what happens. I'm going to try it. She's over available. I tried the over available thing too this semester. I'm like, nope, if a student emails me, I'm responding right away. And it actually worked out pretty well. I think by putting off students too much. Now, I won't respond to the student via email or text or cell phone if it's my writing time. But otherwise, what I did was I made myself more responsive so that during my writing time, I just actually got less questions, I think, or I had less hanging over my head with students because I had already taken care of it. So I would say be as responsive as you can to students because they're trying to move their work forward, and responding with we have this new generation. You know, these were all graduate students, but like the young generation with technology, like they're used to quick responses and they're used to finding information quickly and getting what they need quickly. And I don't think it's because they want to be annoying. I think it's because that's what they're used to, and they want to move forward quickly. Like they wanted to get their work done for the semester too. So that was the approach I took, and I know Jen takes it as like, be super responsive, and you tend to get less questions. The students appreciate that. They love that. And then I think they respect you for that too.
And then
so
when you don't answer, it's like, oh, she's busy. You know what I mean? Because you didn't.
That's right.
Yeah, because you're so responsive that they kind of respect it even more.
Yeah. So I think that's good advice, is just realize during that week too, maybe if it's finals week and you have a lot of student meetings.
That's why mine's scheduled for 14 weeks.
Yeah, just, you know, your writing time, just maybe that week be like, okay, I'm getting my 30 minutes. That might be all I get that week, right? Because it's not about it's about planning, but it's not about being super rigid with yourself, because then you get that stress. You know, it's about detailed planning, but also it's fluid. You know, have some flexibility with yourself, and never put your self-care below your writing. Never do that. Like, get your workout in, and get your nutrition in, and get your family life in, and then do your writing. You'll be a better writer anyway, because you'll be doing good self-care. So. Any other questions? So I hope that was helpful. We've had a lot of fun, so I hope it was helpful to you.